Okay, this lesson is about hermeneutics and the doctrine of the elect, specifically the use of an adjective. And first, before we go any further in hermeneutics, if you've got some tools, here's one: English grammar for language students. Now this is a really inexpensive, it's a little book. Most of my books are little. It's other places I went to, but you can get that. It's just a small thin book, but under the title adjective, it says an adjective is that which is thrown near. It's a word used to modify, describe, limit, or qualify the meaning of a noun. So it's only 23 pages. It's indispensable if you like nice, concise books. Here's one on page 4, talks about the adjective. It's a modern little English grammar to ace New Testament Greek. Of course, you don't need to read the New Testament Greek. Just understand what the adjective does. And of course, the beginner's grammar of the Greek New Testament. These you can get online now in electronic format. And then it'll talk about an adjective, and they agree with substantives, which they modify, gender, number, and case. That gives you some clues if you're looking for a noun, which we'll do that today. A noun which is modified by an adjective, specifically helping us see if it helps us understand what's the great tension and source of even all the bloodshed throughout 2,000 years of Christianity by our persecutors. What's the big deal about being elect? But this is hermeneutics and the elect. Of course, these are just little books, tiny little books, 8 parts of speech, this little English grammar. It's really helpful. Here's a little linguistic key for those of you that would like another resource to help you with your grammar. Dana and Manti, these are all tools we were given and taught to use, not the little modern ones. I picked those up along the way. Here's a modern text for, what do you call it? Hermeneutics, interpretation. This one was through the University of Central Arkansas. This book was in the Missionary Baptist Seminary. It's considered the new book. Well, it was for me. I'm sure it's obsolete now. But I guess the mainstay, the one that's always more substantial, but it's Interpreting the Bible by Nicholson. And that's enough of that. Those are just some resources as you collect your books. And don't feel bad if the good ones are little small books and not very impressive looking to people. The power is in their utility. But just staying with the English for a moment, especially for those, there's several people have asked me about the King James Bible. And yes, I enjoy teaching people how to use it. It's regrettable so many people tout the book, but then don't really want to learn how to use it. Sometimes it appears that the English is as avoided as the Greek and Hebrew. If you're not careful, people won't notice when people are touting the King James that they're not teaching how to use it. But in Matthew 9, for example, this is just hermeneutics lesson now. It says, I am not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. The word sinners there and righteous, neither of them have the adjective in the original, and it kind of gets you thinking about the quality. The contrast here is between righteous, these who have established their own righteousness. You can see contrast between Pharisees, publicans, sinners. There's classes: Pharisees, Sadducees, publicans, and sinners. This isn't a theological statement about every person being or not being with sin. That's another context and another message. This is about Jesus speaking on behalf of a class of people who were maligned and so classified by the self-righteous that Jesus, of course, went against them when he said he came to call these. So when you hear a lot of debate about general or effectual calls, this is actually talking about people who have already heard the gospel and are now suffering the reprisals from the established religious orders, which are it's the main theme throughout the entire gospel narratives. And now Jesus is not calling those people who have created rules, regulations, and would not even use a finger to lift the burdens they placed on people. So he comes to advocate on this class of people. So that helps you first, that the contrast in the Bible is not between elect and non-elect. It's between those who have their own base of righteousness and those who have trusted the gospel and unfortunately are trapped or ensnared in, let's say, a type of Egyptianity, for a figure of speech. So that's a good lesson. Turn to Matthew 24 in our English text, and it says the elect's sake. Well, that word elect's an adjective, so it would be referring to the elect sinners who came from that class. And of course you can see, you don't hear a lot of people arguing, no, we're the sinners, no, we're the sinners. I don't mean to laugh, but if you knew, and we do, a lot of people know the history of God's people for 2,000 years, even today in our wonderful, great United States, that God shed His grace upon it, and Baptist blood was spilled to establish it. Thomas Jefferson collaborated with us to establish the Bills of Rights, Constitution, Declaration, and now in this country, people who have become very blessed, physically prosperous because of the blood of Baptists are now even maligning us today, which we don't really not want to be the sinners. We don't have a desire to not be those who are outside the camp suffering ridicule. So the ridicule is actually just a vindication of what the gospel's always taught us. Now let's go to Romans for a moment. And Romans 5:8, famous text, but God commended His love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. This is because Paul's writing, he's the chief of sinners, writing to them about what is that church, that aggregate of the elect sinners, how are they to understand their legitimacy and the purpose for Christ coming and what He's done. He didn't come to die for the wolves, he said, rather for His sheep. There's a great metaphor there. Metaphors, you can look that up in your Hermeneutics book. It'll tell you the value of those and how advantageous they are. And here now Paul's the chief of sinners, sending them this letter to Rome explaining the gospel. But let's move on down. Verse 15, it says, but not as the offense, so also is the free gift. For if through the offense of one many be dead, much more the grace of God and the gift by grace, which is by one man, Jesus Christ, has abounded unto many. Now you see many being contrasted. In the Koine text, it's somewhat of a controversy of which I was not a participant and did not really find myself engaged in it until recently. But someone said it's actually the many, and it says the many died or dead, and then it says the many, you see, which is by one man, Jesus Christ, hath abounded unto many the gift by grace. Well, this clears up quickly when you realize that many is an adjective also. So the many sinners, that was easy. Someone said, well, what do you say about the many righteous? Didn't they die in Adam? Yes, but since they never received this gift by grace, then the parallelism, which you'll learn about that in hermeneutics as well, you can study it in the Hebrew language especially. Paul was writing about how the sinners died and how these people were made sinners and then how they became righteous. Here, how they died and then how they came to life. I don't know where the gospel is for the self-righteous. I don't even know of a book that would be written to them to say the self-righteous died by the disobedience of one man, but they never lived again because they rejected the gift by grace. Anyway, that's just silly. But anyway, again, it goes back to now the Bible is making a lot of sense, and there really is a tension, that is a stress and a frictive element, because, you know, as soon as people came out from among the religious traditions and established orders, let's say that was governed by Pharisees and Sadducees, persecution began. In verse 19, for example, it tells us here, one man's disobedience, many were made sinners, so by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous. Here, many again is an adjective, and these numerous elect sinners tells us how they became or were made sinners, and now it tells us how they became righteous. So that's what the gospel account's about, is how does someone who was cast aside, classed as a sinner, not only breaking God's laws, but now not following the endless, futile traditions of religious orders, and then Jesus comes and calls them. So if there's anything particular, as people teach today, it would only refer to the particular sinners who believe the gospel from among all the other sinners, for not all the sinners, we have nowhere in the Bible that says all the sinners responded positively to Christ's call, and we know the only ones who did not had rejected the gospel. So it's gospel-centered, and of course the tension that people really don't want to talk about today because of the pluralism we have in our culture, and you can thank Baptist for that. That is, that word Baptist not being the denominational term, not being a religious term, but being the accusation against people who practice their faith rather than obeying the traditions of men or submitting themselves to kings and rulers who would confiscate and combined with religion. We're here to advocate what we established in the beginning of this nation, the freedom of conscience, thought, and speech. And of course, when you read the Bills of Rights, you'll know that state religions that are no longer legalized in this country, like the Fifth Amendment prevents an inquisition, First Amendment prevents us from being harassed for peaceably assembling, Second Amendment gives us the right to protect ourselves against persecutors. I think the modern term is terrorist. So none of that which is historically known by these religious orders, state religionists, is practiced today. So a lot of this tension is no longer here. It's more of an abstract conjecture that entertains philosophers to try to discuss who are the elect. Well, it's never difficult to know that when someone comes out and severs their ties, which is what the word church means, a called out body. So the aggregate of the elect sinners can be found in a New Testament church, and it's not really hard. And if you want to make your calling an election sure, you can only do that through a New Testament church. That's all good news, because his assemblies are strategically localized throughout the whole world. Now, closing out this lesson on hermeneutics and the elect, he said, therefore I endure all things for the elects. The elect what? Of course, the elect sinners, that they may also obtain the salvation which is in Christ Jesus with eternal glory. Now, of course, this is from the chief of sinners. There wouldn't be anything unusual about that. But again, the bottom line is when you use your hermeneutics, you can take your King James Bible, and yes, you have the opportunity to apply grammar to English words. And if you're not doing that, I don't know how to say the use of the King James Bible is even possible. It would also, you can see how much hermeneutics clears things up if you really want to know. But again, it brings back that contrast between those who come out, and that is respond to the call to come out, and then we become this called out assembly, you see. And what happens is we're under the headship of Christ and Him alone. And this becomes problematic if you are from that religious order, and I'll just draw a pyramid, that's the best depiction. But if you're the ruler of a pyramid, and that is you have propped yourself up and positioned yourself between God and man in the place of Christ, then the doctrine of election can be very much troubling. But in our abstract, surreal, very abundantly blessed, socially, social driven through social media society, a virtual society, no one really, it's such abstract conversations that I kind of laugh sometimes when I notice through my internet that I'm now becoming more acquainted with, that people don't discuss even who these people are in relation to what caused them to be so despised. Well, they had believed the gospel, and as missionary Baptists, we know that anyone in any pyramid, whatever it is, whatever the Judaic religious state, the Catholic religious state, the Protestant religious state, now the Islamic religious state, any occultic orders, whatever they are, you can hear the gospel and believe it and be born again. And of course, we'll be happy to obey Christ and continue to invite you to come out as well. And that would be a better understanding if you wanted one based on the Bible. And you can use your King James. This is large print because I can't seem to read anymore. Those tiny words. But that's enough about hermeneutics and the elect. This will help you with anything you want to know to get you started. Have a good day.